awesome.
I see folks joining us now. Welcome, everybody. Great to see this room fill up with folks. Let me open my grid so I can see folks, and then also the chat, if you can keep the chat open. So I would like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is being recorded as well. This is titled A Place for Knowledge Exchange. It's co-hosted by the College of Rural and Community Development and IARC, which is the International Arctic Research Center at UAF. We are so excited about today's theme. And overall, this series is about collaborative approaches to research, education, and real-life community-based practices in rural Alaska. So it's building that connection really between our communities and the research community. And we have some really exciting guests here today. These are our facilitators. There's myself, Santa Roach, Dr. Black, Dr. Margaret Rudolph as well, and Josie Sam. I would like to start off with a land acknowledgement. Everywhere we live and work is native land. We recognize, appreciate, and honor Indigenous peoples and their past, present, and future land stewardship. We are committed to long-term reciprocal relationships with Indigenous organizations and knowledge holders to create relevant and actionable information in support of their sovereignty and self-determination. So it's always important to do that land acknowledgement as we get started here. So we have a really exciting topic today, which is food security and insecurity and local implications. So we have amazing speakers joining us, Eva Dawn Burk, Vernae Angnaboogok, and Carrie Stevens. And Eva is going to start off with her slides. She has a master's in science, is a master's in science student at Natural Resource Environment at UAF. Vernae is the Cultural Sustainability Advisor and Inuit Circumpolar Council, Alaska. And then Carrie is an Associate Professor and Chair at Department of Tribal Governance, CRCD. So be ready to be educated and enlightened by these amazing individuals whose really life work is around this topic and others. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eva. And please, if you have any questions, we're going to have an opportunity to connect with them individually after their presentations. Go ahead, Eva.
Hi, Gwenda, Eva Dawn Burk, Sa'uza, Tagatili, Ta'onoth, Tanek, Tona Eslan. I'm Eva Dawn. I'm from Nenana and Manly Hot Springs. And I'm talking about these things today, but a little bit about food sovereignty as well. And we prepared a video not last year, in 2022, actually, about some of our work down in Nenana. So we could play that next.
Oh, yes, let me log on to that. Sorry, let me stop my share and get this up and running for us. Thank you, Eva. Okay.
I don't think there's audio.
You hear it now?
No.
Anybody else hear it?
I'm Eva Dawn. I'm from Nenana and Manly Hot Springs, and my parents are Dim and Joy Burke. I was raised at a fish camp 90 miles down the river on the Tanana, and we ran a trap line about 30 miles west of here, probably like halfway to the Kantishna River. The people with land back is not just about returning land ownership, but there's a lot of public lands that are managed by people that have no connection to those lands. They sit in their offices and they hire a team of scientists that might not be from here, and they make a whole plan about how they get to use our lands with little input from the local people or the indigenous people who live there. And so that whole process needs to change. And I'll say this about food. This is food sovereignty. My dad was born a free man. Nobody told him when and where and how to hunt, fish, or trap. He did that on his own with his own indigenous knowledge. We've gotten into these habits, like how do we start to break these habits? And it's just a little bit at a time, little one step at a time.
We could go to the next slide. And it was really important to me to share that video today because it highlights like how we're trying to keep our traditional food, the knowledge around our traditional foods and pass that down. But we're also adapting. We're also starting to get into more gardening and agriculture because we can't rely on these systems to react, and we need to be prepared for what the future holds. And also there should be another, I believe there's another land sale coming up in 2024. And I just saw announced in the legislature, there's a bill about making more public lands in Alaska available for sale. So I will be keeping people informed of those land sales. And I have a couple of small businesses, but we also started a nonprofit, and we kind of were like, hey, there's this land sale happening. Why don't we try to reclaim some of our own lands? So we did. And we knew that we had a mission and that this land would help us support us actually building the infrastructure and the programs that we see necessary. And we know that we've been disconnected from our homelands. I grew up on a trap line, I grew up at fish camp. And then as I became older, I had to go to college, work in a very colonized job, and then since then have been like healing and returning to the land to heal and realizing the potential for this to work, not just within for myself, my family, but as for our community as a whole. And that's why we're building the farm. We want to create a space for intergenerational learning and unlearning while healing and restoring our relationships to our ancestral lands and waters. So we are rematriating the land. Next slide, please. And we focus on a lot of stuff. And I think we have these bigger goals of doing more like real stewardship projects. We talk a lot about co-stewardship. I won't even get into that today. But the things that we're really engaged in right now is food sovereignty. And also we know that to bring more people in our village, like we can do anything, right? If we're well. And we know that our wellness is deeply tied to our culture and our land. And so that's why we're doing all these different programs in Nenana to bring our people together. And I am also the culture camp director for Nenana, and we'll probably be hosting another camp this year for the 4th year. And that all of this work is to strengthen our community wellness. And so we can identify our priorities as a community and work on them together, but also to think about like people like myself who want to come home, who actually like grew up in rural Alaska, and like there may be a way for us to work from those places on some bigger issues for our tribes, especially when we have these, technologies of possibly having more internet capability in rural Alaska, having the technology of Zoom to share information. So I really look forward and excited about what the future holds for our people. Next slide, please. And I wanted to show this nerdy slide. And yes, my friend, my friend made a meme of me, and I was like using the color purple snake eyes. I don't know if you guys ever saw that on the movie, so it kind of made me laugh. But I really think like for any project that you're trying to do, because I am on several Alaska Native Advisory Councils for research projects and involved in many different groups at the university, especially like thinking about National Science Foundation and the need to work with communities and the need to include Indigenous knowledge, but feeling like there's a lot of like checking the box in that work, and how do we actually make that more meaningful? And I can use my own research to talk about that, because I had this idea for a project, and the potential of the project, my project is called Healing Through Food and Culture, but I really knew that there was potential because I had done some homework, and I didn't just look at research articles, but I was looking at the community and economic development plans that tribes had created in my region to see what were their goals and was there a goal for food security and what were the issues around food security, food sovereignty. And so I think a lot of times people will come and they have this idea for a project. They're not really thinking about, hey, what's the potential and who should I be partnering with? They're like, this is the place I want to work. This is the project I want to do. And I really think that's where we need to slow down and to really think about looking at what tribes research needs and priorities are, finding the potential that like, hey, maybe this work could help, you know, bring this tribe to have more information for their own decision making that they need. So that kind of brings in those three. And then through that, you can start to develop those pilot projects. And so I think it's really important to understand that you, like, even for me, I needed to do a series of pilot projects in Nenana around fish camp, around gardening. So I'm like, okay, what are the pathways to help these programs be more sustainable for the long term? So that I'm not just here creating this program. And when I leave, and all my connections and research and all of that, I take that with me. You know, I'm trying to make sure that that's staying in the community and that these pathways are always to connect our people to the information that they need to share in the decision making spaces that they're already in. And so I think that that's where the plan, that's when you can actually start to plan. And so I think this really takes a lot more time, but the result in the end is worth it, not only for yourself as a researcher, but for the communities that you may be trying to work with. Next slide. And I'm not even paying attention to time. I apologize. I will try to hurry up. This is the longest slide. And this is a lot. And I really appreciate that Carrie's on this call, because if you're interested in learning how to advocate, Carrie has a series of tribal governance classes that are directly made for that. And these are some of the places that I actively work in every day. And this takes a lot of work and time. And so I think it's really important, like when people are like in fisheries research or they're researching things on the land and they're thinking about food sovereignty, are they actually participating in the decision-making spaces? That's a whole lot of work. And so I've listed the state, the federal decision-making spaces for fish and game. And it's really interesting because like we see all these spaces, but they're not able to make decisions and the system is not able to respond to the crisis that we're already in. And it can feel really frustrating and like you're trying to move mountains, like you're just like David and Goliath, these things that we hear all the time, but it's true. And I made a comment in a co-stewardship symposium that the corporations are co-stewarding the lands because in each of these decision-making spaces, they have so much influence. They're voting. Like the industry is voting on our fish and game, our ability to have those resources into the future, and ignoring our indigenous knowledge that for decades now has been warning of this crisis that we're now in. And it's not just with salmon, it's with caribou, it's with seabirds, it's with marine mammals. There's a lot of different species. Our ecosystem is crying for us to take action. So I really recommend that people try to look into these organizations more and figure out how you can fit in and be part of the process. But most importantly, go there and start listening to the people of the land who are sharing their stories and what's really happening on the ground. Next slide. I'll try to wrap this up real quick. These last few slides are mostly pictures from the work we do. And this right here is why we try to go to all those crazy meetings and show up for our people, because we want to be able for our young people to grow up grounded in their culture and their traditions, to have that opportunity to practice. We actually fly salmon in so they can do that. It's not right. It's not a long-term solution. It's very much a band-aid, but it's given us a little joy in a very hard time. And this is why we do the work. Next slide. And I really want to give a shout out because we are trying to teach our young people like about the different options of education at the university and some ways that, you know, they can, like, again, having the researchers come down to us where we're at and showing us the things that we're interested in. So we were looking at different tools here with some archaeologists that were found in our area. So that was really cool to look at all the different intricate tools and the real demonstration of how smart Indigenous people are. And then also we had a drones program coming down and thinking more about how we can use drones and technology to check out what's happening around our lands and get some ideas for doing some research. And also the kids just really enjoy these different technologies. And I give a shout out for my own advisor who has allowed me to take a different path in my research and using a lot more of Indigenous research methods and very much like community-led research. So I appreciate Dr. Sarah Trainer for doing that. And then next slide, please. And then this is one area of food sovereignty that I think the university and others, I know there's a beaver workshop coming up here at the end of February. And I think it's really important to understand best how to live in relationship with the beavers instead of considering them like this big threat and like they're over colonizing, but learn how to live in relationship and learn how to trap and eat beaver. Next slide, please. And also like we're using all parts and remembering that when we're doing food security, it's not just about food security, but that the animals and fish that we are taking, we are using all the parts for all the different things that we need. Tanning moose hides, tanning furs, making tools outside of some of the bones, artwork out of some of the bones, fleshers, you can make fleshers out of the bones. There's all kinds of things that you can do. So I just want to leave it at that. I just have one final slide. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. That was probably way longer than 10 minutes. I apologize.
That was great. No, thank you, Eva Dawn. I think that was a wonderful presentation. I love that scraper that you were using in that picture. And I do see a question coming in, and we'll get a chance at the end to circle back to those questions. And I appreciate the process that you shared in that earlier slide as well. So again, this is being recorded and you can always review it again later. So appreciate that presentation. Next, we have Vernae presenting for us. Hi, Vernae.
Hi, Santa, and hi, everybody. Kayana for inviting ICC Alaska to share our work on Inuit food security and food sovereignty. Food security has always been a top priority of ICC Alaska, and our approach is food security through a hunting culture, as that remains at the center of our health, well-being, and our overall cultural sustainability. I will do my best to share a snapshot of our work. Wait, why is it advancing? Go back. Sorry, I don't know. I will tell you when to go to the next slide. I'll do my best to share a snapshot of our work with you in the limited amount of time we have. However, I was telling Santa yesterday that I could talk to you all for about a week or longer about Inuit food security and food sovereignty and still not cover it all. And Eva, I wish we could say we're on native time here, but we are in some time constraints here. So I might breeze through some of these slides, but I honestly tried to cut out as much as I could to meet the time requirement. But if I had cut any more out, I wouldn't have been doing due diligence to the work that I need to share. And all of those pieces are important pieces. So while some I might take a short amount of time in, I'll try to breeze through some of them if possible. So go ahead, next slide. First, I want to share a little bit about who we are. This is a map of Inuit Nunat, our homelands. ICC was founded in 1977 by the late Eben Hobson Sr., a visionary leader from Utqiagvik, Alaska, and its creation came out of the realization that Inuit needed to speak with a unified voice on issues of common concern. And today, ICC represents approximately 180,000 Inuit across Chukotka, Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. The ICC receives our mandate from our General Assembly held every 4 years, which brings circumpolar Inuit together to discuss issues, address common concerns, celebrate our culture, and strengthen our unity across Inuit Nunat. The 2022 ICC Ilulisat Declaration is our current mandate that gives us the direction to carry out our work in this term, 2022 to 2026. Next slide. ICC Alaska advocates on behalf of 4 Alaskan Inuit regions, the North Slope, the Northwest Arctic, the Bering Strait, and Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta regions. This is the homeland of 83 villages, of which there are 95 federally recognized tribes across the 4 regions. Next slide. Our cultural survival. I would like to share a snapshot of some of our history and how our people have overcome a number of attacks on our food sovereignty. And again, this can be dived into a lot deeper, but just to provide a little bit of background on the unity and the organization of ICC across the circumpolar is deeply rooted in some of these attacks on our food sovereignty. So in 1977, the International Whaling Commission imposed a ban on our traditional bowhead whale hunt without consulting our people. As a result of this ban, the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission was formed to take action and to bring Inuit to the decision-making table. And since 1977, the AEWC has advocated on behalf of the 11 whaling villages it represents to preserve the traditional subsistence hunt of the bowhead whale. And the next issue I want to bring up is in 1961, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 became heavily enforced in Alaska, which made hunting migratory waterfowl illegal in the springtime without taking into consideration Inuit traditional hunting of geese and ducks and gathering of their eggs for our survival. Federal game wardens came to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta region and to Utqiagvik to arrest hunters who harvested ducks to feed their families. And in 1961, the people of Utqiagvik stood up in protest of the Migratory Bird Treaty. At that point in time, our people had never even heard of the treaty. And the documentary, The Duck Inn, tells the lived experiences of hunters in Utqiagvik who were arrested for taking ducks out of season, and the strong leadership and community response organized by the late Eben Hobson, who organized a protest to bring together every man, woman, and child in solidarity to take a stand in front of this game warden. And this resulted in a signed statement, saying that they hunted the ducks out of season, demanded to be arrested. This overwhelmed the game warden, and a written petition was signed by about 300 Utqiagvik residents to President Kennedy, demanding the right to hunt waterfowl at any time of the year. And of course, it took many, many years, decades, to gain success in this legal exemption, where the treaty was finally amended to allow the taking of migratory birds and their eggs for our traditional and customary purposes. There are so many more challenges that remain today. We heard a little bit from Eva about some of those challenges where we're needing Our people have traditionally and culturally managed our fish and wildlife so we can ensure our traditional food resources are here. Needs, what is available, and not on individual needs. We are not feeding just our own household, we are feeding our whole community. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me now. My internet is becoming unstable. I'm going to turn off my video. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now. Thanks, Vernae.
Okay, so I don't know if you heard that, but okay, it's okay. Go to next slide.
My cursor. Okay.
Again, I'm just pushing through some of these slides that I might not have the time to go really in depth into detail. And something that I had at the tail end of the previous slide, you don't need to go back, Santa, was just these continued pressures and the hurt that our people are feeling from those multiple pressures being placed on our food security and attacks on our food sovereignty, to where our own people cannot sustainably support ourselves from utilizing our traditional management practices, because what has happened has gone out of control. And this here, I'm talking about the Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound region salmon crash. And when things like that happen and are hurting our communities, it's our people who are always the first to be targeted to limit our hunting and fishing, while we are only a small percentage of the entire user group. And this approach is not working and is not sustainable. There's a severe power imbalance, as these outside management agencies have significant power and control over how and who sets the funding, the agenda, and the pathways to decision-making, and even the frameworks under which management is carried out. Our people are calling for equity throughout the management regimes to determine our own hunting, gathering, fishing, land, and water policies. For thousands of years, our people have utilized our Indigenous knowledge and traditional management practices that apply holistic, adaptive approaches to sustainably manage our resources. And each village has their own management practices they comply with through traditional and customary laws. And we are only raised to take what we need. We have to share with those who are unable to fish, hunt, and gather, and to utilize all of the resources so it's not wasted. And the Western regulations, for example, clash with our traditional management practices, and the system that's imposed upon our people makes us, for example, get a proxy to hunt or fish for someone else, our loved one, instead of sharing food in our traditional and cultural way. And to emphasize further, we respect the animals that give themselves to our people, and we respect the land and waters that provide for us. And in our traditional management practices, we are already, in our own practices and through living our culture, we are already responding to stressors and adjusting our hunting, fishing, and gathering practices. And we have the knowledge and capacity to manage our own resources. Next slide. I'll try to take a quick run through this, but I needed to lay the foundation for the work that we do at ICC Alaska. And over the years and since ICC's inception, our work has focused on advancing Inuit food security and food sovereignty to protect our hunting culture and way of life. And this work is it's rooted back in ICC Alaska's earlier work and goes back to the 1983 Alaska Native Review Commission work that was commissioned, where ICC Alaska commissioned Thomas Berger to conduct this Alaska Native Review Commission to review the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And interviews are taken from across Alaska in 62 villages and towns to hear Alaska Native evidence and testimony from people that are my elders' time in that era about ANCSA, and resulted in this book, Village Journey, which published recommendations in 3 primary areas: land, self-government, and subsistence, for changes in the law for Alaska Native peoples to retain control over our lands, hunting, and fishing rights. And the voices, the vision, and the aspiration of our elders captured in Village Journey are still relevant today. Our work has transpired over time, and we also realize that during this process, what the rest of the world was talking about, especially regarding food security and food sovereignty, was not what Inuit were talking about. So in response to that, Alaskan Inuit came together from our 4 regions to define for ourselves what food security and food sovereignty means to us. Next slide. This is our Inuit ecosystem. This is what Inuit Nunat looks like through our cultural lens. This is how we see the world. Our ecosystem includes our people, the animals, our culture, and our way of life. It includes sharing of our food, preparing and storing of our food, our language, singing and dancing, celebrations, and other pieces that are found within those pieces, and that everything in this ecosystem is interconnected and interdependent. And within our knowledge, in what is known by most as an ecosystem approach is already inherent with the way that we monitor the questions that we ask about the environment we live in and we live with, and how we manage our behavior within our environment. And this is what we mean when we say we need to take a holistic approach. Next slide. I'm going to use this puzzle as an example. During the food security project, an elder shared and explained that the Arctic can be seen as a puzzle made up of many pieces. And as I was mentioning earlier, all these pieces are needed to make up our ecosystem, to understand the Arctic and to understand our food security. And our problem happens when people outside our culture come in and look at just one of those pieces and study it and make policy recommendations or decisions about what is happening in the Arctic without considering the whole. Our people understand that these pieces are always adjusting, and we pay close attention to where the pieces connect and their reliance on one another. And in order to understand food security and the Arctic, we need to look at all of these pieces holistically. This requires equitable engagement of Inuit and our Indigenous knowledge in all matters that affect our way of life. Next slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but people can refer back to it. As I understand, this video will be made available later and you can come back to it. But I wanted to read the first sentence that says, food security, our people have defined food security as a natural right of all Inuit to be a part of the ecosystem, to access food, to caretake, protect, and respect all of life, land, water, and air. And I'm just gonna leave that to soak in for a little bit. And the rest of this definition is extremely important and goes into context of what that means, what Inuit are talking about when we're talking about food security, all the integral components and how they relate to each other in that process, how different components are needed in order to ensure our food security and how none of those pieces can be without. Next slide. During this food security project, our people also defined what food sovereignty means to us. And they said food sovereignty is a right of Alaskan Inuit to define our own hunting, gathering, fishing, land, and water policies, the right to define what is sustainably, socially, economically, and culturally appropriate for the distribution of food, and to maintain ecological health, the right to obtain and maintain practices that ensure access to the tools that are needed to obtain, process, store, and eat or consume our traditional foods. And all of this is needed in order to ensure our food sovereignty. Next slide. And something that we realized and we continue to emphasize, our people continue to emphasize, that without food sovereignty, we cannot have food security. Next slide. This is our work continued. And I'm going to breeze through this because we don't have too much time, but basically our work builds off our existing and previous work. And some of these projects went side by side each other. The food sovereignty and self-governance Inuit role in managing Arctic marine resources and the Alaskan Inuit food sovereignty initiative went nearly side by side during the time of when they were being facilitated and ongoing at the time. They both now concluded, and the ICC Wildlife Management Summit was pivotal point in time where Inuit across the circumpolar came together in 2017 to talk about our role in the wildlife of the resources that we depend on and how we could unify across our 4 countries to strengthen the management of our traditional food resources and how we could move away from this sort of single species approach and other different approaches, outside imposed management approaches that put us in that divide us by borders is what I'm trying to say. So how we looked at how we could aspire to achieve cross-border or international collaboration on wildlife management across Inuit Nunat. And these projects, the other 2 projects, the Food Sovereignty and Self-Governance Project and the Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Initiative, set out to carry that work forward, to position Alaskan Inuit in a place where we can have this foundation laid and we could continue to advance our food sovereignty. So next slide. I'm going to bypass this, so anybody that wants to come back and see it. Anyways, just a quick little blurb. I facilitated this project of Alaskan Inuit across our 4 regions from 2018 to 2022. This project has now completed. There will be some things that I will share with you a little bit further down that will give you a better idea of what this project strived to achieve. Go to next slide, please. And again, this is another slide I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to, but I didn't want to leave it out. So a part of our Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Initiative was to gather our people across our 4 regions. We had a series of steering committee meetings. We had Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Summit. And some of these barriers were identified very early on in our project at our first steering committee meeting, in terms of barriers that are getting in the way of us advancing our food sovereignty, that are prohibiting us from having our food security. And it really goes back to the systems that are in place, the inequities that are in place, and the need to revamp this whole system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that going further down. So go ahead and move on, Santa. Thank you. So this is just a photo I wanted to share with everybody. This was everybody pretty much. There might be some people that were missing that were a part of our Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Summit that was held in 2019 in Nome, Alaska. A lot of hard, difficult discussions were held, strategy building, unity building, working together to tackle this tough issue, to get our people on the same page and develop a unified position on how to advance our food sovereignty. Next slide. And these are some photos. I'm going to let Santa go ahead and press play on that video, and then I promise I'll wrap up.
Yep, I'm just reopening it in another.
While she's reopening it, I just want to say, like, the reason I want to share this video is because you can hear directly from our people on what they were saying, how heartfelt it was that this work was done. It looks like it's starting, so
Yep.
oh no.
You want me to play it?
Yeah, if you can.
People who are not living here need to know about our way of life. People that are in the lower 48 or other countries who don't depend on wildlife or whales or birds that we eat.
Food is survival. Food is culture. Food is language. Food is everything. It would be really brilliant if our people could reach their hands across the whole of Inuit Nunat and the whole of the circumpolar Arctic homelands that we call ours to achieve the kind of food security and ability to manage the resources without encroachment and imposition or prescriptions defined by others. That's who we are, you know, and the way that the systems are right now are very, they're not fit for our people. So we need to have these discussions on what do we need to do to make it right. It's time.
Maybe I'll just end it with that. I have a few other slides people could come back and revisit later. If you wanted to push through them, that's fine, Santa. I just don't want to take up any more time. And it really is a difficult topic to discuss and get through within a very small amount of time. So apologies to my other panelists for the amount of time that I took up, but it really is difficult to wrap this all up without doing due diligence to the work that we've done.
And my apologies too, Vernae. I feel like you're right. And to the other panelists, you know, really this amazing work that you guys have done, everyone wants to hear about, and we should have really thought about doing it into 2 separate parts so we could hear appropriately from everybody. And I'll just, if there's anything you want me to call out or to call out in these next slides, I'll just kind of cruise through them. But if there's anything that stands out to you, Vernae, let me know.
It's almost over.
And just amazing photos and representation from the Inuit people. They're just absolutely beautiful. And thank you for going over the amount of work that went into all of this and the leadership and guidance throughout the whole process and the voices heard. So thank you so much, Vernae. Appreciate that. And then we do have a couple questions coming through here and there. And I think we'll have enough time at the end to do maybe 1 or 2 questions. And handing it off to you now, Carrie. Welcome. Good to see you.
Anabasi, thank you very much, Santa. And it's a very much an honor to be here today and be on the same panel as Eva Dawn and Vernae. They're just such amazing powerhouses doing this work with love and heart. And I just want to honor all of the people that are not in the room today, all of the people that we do this work for. This is heart work, as both Eva and Vernae shared. It's about so much more than just the simplified English terms of food sovereignty. It's about wellness, it's about healing, it's about ways of life. And so I really want to honor Eva and Vernae and the work that they do for their people to be here with them. For those of you that don't know me, Ina, Nino, welcome to our time together. My name is Carrie Stevens, and I'm a white settler here at the Trothieta campus in Fairbanks on the lands of the Chinat-Futani. And I serve as a tribal governance faculty and just the current chair, and as a lead on our Drumbeats Alaska Consortium. It is an Alaska Native Hawaiian Serving Award from the USDA NEFA that we have held here at the College of Rural and Community Development for over 20 years. And it's focused on place-based solutions for Alaska Native food and energy sovereignty. So I really just want to lift up all of our programs and some of the work that we all do across the college. Thank you, Santa. So as you can see here, we have multiple programs across multiple campuses from the Chukchi campus all the way to here in the interior to Bristol Bay. And hopefully you can all see this slide well. The work that we do in food sovereignty within Drumbeats and within CRCD
focuses on food security and sovereignty projects and our high latitude range management program, which is our reindeer herding program out of Sicknisook, and ethnobotany and food as, plants as food and plants as medicine work, and our Bristol Bay campus and Curryong environmental studies and our sustainable energy programs. We're working on Alaska Gardens and sustainable hydroponics. We have quite a bit going on and a lot of cross collaboration. And here at the Interior Alaska campus, we lead the tribal stewardship and governance project and programs out of our campus. Our goal is overall, of course, to advance place-based Alaska Native food and energy sovereignty through equitable education. And every year, by federal guidelines, we have to update our objectives and our goals. And but I really wanted to capture some of the essence of what we're doing here. And as you've heard from Vernae and from Eva, so much of the food sovereignty work is really based in wild and cultivated food systems. And so we're doing that, really working to amplify and lift up Alaska Native knowledge, Alaska Native voices in these systems, both in the educational systems and in the governance systems. Always working in our energy systems as well, but for today, I'll really focus on our food systems. One of the things that we really want to ensure is that our Alaska Native students and leaders have access to and equity in our academic institutions in this work. And I just want to say that Eva and Vernae are both engaged in this work here at UAF, and I really hope that they feel uplifted and a place to speak their truth in their classrooms and across their academic experience here at UAF. A lot of our students have shared that they do not feel safe to do so. And of course, just our goal in our educational programs is to build technical and leadership skills and knowledge to do this work at the community level, at the local level. And so there are a few pictures there, of course, of our students and our programs. You can go ahead. I want to make sure we have some time for some questions. I just want to lift up, as Eva and Vernae did, this concept of food sovereignty and what we're really talking about today. And it's very important from our perspective of tribal governance to recognize that the sovereignty of tribes predates the sovereignty of the United States. And that in itself is recognized in the US Constitution. I also want to recognize what Vernae and Eva shared is that sovereignty, food sovereignty, is living your traditional ways of life. It includes all aspects from ceremony to song to dance to regalia to spirituality to relationship with the water, the air, the earth, to practicing traditional forms of governance, of law, as Vernae shared. It's so much more than just being able to catch a fish, just being able to harvest a moose. And we really have to think holistically along these terms to adequately uplift, protect, and serve Alaska Native food sovereignty. Go ahead. So these are just some examples of the work that we're doing across the state. Of course, they're down in the right-hand corner. The high latitude range management program is just amazing in its work with the reindeer community in Northwest and the hands-on applications of the courses from Indigenous knowledge to science. And again, across the Chukchi and Bethel campuses, you really see this work in food sovereignty in Alaska Gardens, in getting the youth engaged, and trying new and different techniques and varieties, growing in connexes, using sustainable energy to grow food. And for us, in tribal governance and stewardship, as Eva and Vernae shared, is ensuring that Alaska Native students have the opportunity and understanding to participate in these decision-making forums. Wild foods are still a majority of the diet across all Alaska Native and tribal communities, but yet it's only 1%. It is less than 1% of the overall take of wild foods in Alaska is what the state defines as subsistence. Let that sink in. It is less than 1%. Subsistence is less than 1% of the overall take of wild foods in Alaska. And yet Alaska Natives do not have a voice at the table. And so that's a lot of work we're doing here. And you see one of our students proudly testifying in his moose skin vest, using all parts of the animal at the Board of Game there. So you can go ahead. We really do focus on student leadership, on making sure that they have experiential learning opportunities, tuition, travel, opportunity to speak, to present, to intern, to mentor, really addressing the whole student and meeting them where they are in this process and what their critical needs are. Can you go ahead? I just want to say that if you want to engage in this work effectively, you can't do it alone. These are just some of the community and collaboration approaches we take in drumbeats across the state. All various types of tribal organizations, community organizations, for-profits, nonprofits that are all engaged in this work. This work does not exist in a silo. But I think most importantly, I'll wrap up here and hopefully we have time for a question or two, is that in doing this work, you can go to the next slide, Santa, the last slide. Many of you will hear me say the way we do the work is the work. Whether you are a teaching faculty, a research faculty, a student coming from an agency, it's how are you approaching the work that we do? Are you addressing the whole person? Are you meeting them and their community where they're at? Or are you trying to meet your own needs, your own desires, and your own concerns? So I always want to thank Dr. Black introduced me to the 4 R's and this paper by LaDonna Harris and Wazalowski. Are you meeting your responsibilities as a faculty? Are we utilizing our resources, our privilege? Are we working in relationship with our students and their communities? Are we making sure that there's access and equity in these systems? Are we creating a system of redistribution and reciprocity? I really think, especially as academics and researchers thinking about what we give back, what is the purpose of this work that we do? And I always say I teach by Instagram, and you see there, at the end of the day, I'd rather be excluded for who I include than be included for who I exclude. So it's really my honor to be here with all of you. You're all amazing, pushing this work forward. And I'll leave it there so we have some time for a wrap up or question or closing, but very much appreciate the invitation. Basi.
Oh, appreciate you so much, Carrie. Heshregasin, to Eva Dawn, to Vernae, and to Carrie. There is a question and a kind of a comment as well, and maybe one of you would feel compelled to answer this about just tribal consultation and what that looks like, the responsibility to the government or researchers or whomever may be working and engaging with tribes, that responsibility and what that looks like. Any one of you? In our last.
I made some response to Charlie, and I'll just speak briefly that, Charlie, you're on point there with the way consultation is carried out and the limitations in these processes. And I would say that one of the pieces with tribal consultation is thinking about at what level and with whom you want to consult. The North Pacific Fisheries Management Council ends with basically the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Commerce. So I would just say, let's think about at what level are you asking for tribal consultation and where does the buck stop? A lot of times we are led down rabbit trails and not asking the right people the right level of questions. And so we do whole classes on tribal consultation. So just trying to answer some of your questions quickly, Charlie, and apologies if not getting everything in there.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for answering that. And then another question that came through, we just have a few more minutes. Thanks, folks, for bearing with us, is from Lonnie about what foundational elements would you include in a food sovereignty code in a tribal constitution? I think that's a great question.
Mhm. I would hand that to Vernae because I feel like Vernae and ICC have like the framework for food sovereignty and all the good words. Yeah, I'm Vernae, sorry, I'm just volunteering you, but I know that I look to Inuit ICC when I'm looking for those words and frameworks.
I'll probably not answer it in a way that everyone's expecting the magic number or the A through Z magic alphabet code, because that's just not the way it works. So the way that I would answer that question, which is the approach that ICC takes to develop consistent messaging, to address issues collectively, to unify and organize our people around the same position to take forward to the next level. It's really rooted in the meaningful engagement of our people, and we take the direction from our people, and it might mean that we have to do a project. I mean, we've done the Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Initiative. Before that, we've done the other projects that I was mentioning, and like probably most notably, the food security project, in which we see ourselves at ICC as a facilitator of our people. And we exist to advance the priorities and the positions and how do I say that our members can utilize us as, this catalyst to advance those messages and those positions that they are putting out there to the world, and just utilize ICC as as this vessel to help extend that further. And we are really rooted in doing the right approach to things and gathering our people together to hear directly from them. What is it that our food security is? What is it that our food sovereignty is? What, like, recently and this might be a reference that somebody could look at, but I was involved in facilitating the Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Initiative, and that resulted in an Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Management Action Plan. So within those 3 years of holding meetings and gathering our people together, our leaders together, as well as Inuit members of co-management organizations together, to really figure out what path we could take forward and what steps are necessary to break down those barriers and advance our food sovereignty, it resulted in that action plan that is available on our website. I think I had a little blurb about it on my slide, and then went into some of those action plan strategy areas that were developed by our people. But I would just say that it's more of a process-wise approach of gathering your people together to get the direction and hear from the community level, through the region, through the region level, and across our 4 regions of Alaska. And then, you know, it kind of extends a little bit further outside of that for us anyway. So we work at the circumpolar level. But I hope that answers the question somewhat.
I think so completely, Vernae. And what we're talking about and what you guys have all touched on is really this reframing of approach, of process, of thinking about the outcomes that's desired, of course, through this work. And you've all talked about those in different ways, but all ultimately making it digestible, as Eva Dawn said before we talked about this. And we hope that this is helpful to folks tuning in today and sheds light on some really important work that these folks are doing and that's going on in our state and in our communities, and representative, of course, of their work, but then also the communities that you're engaging with potentially. So that's really the purpose of this type of a webinar. And we thank you all for attending today, and many thanks to our speakers joining us. And I wish we can keep going. Thank you for joining us for your lunch hour, though, and asking those great questions as well. So thank you, everybody. This recording will be available on the speaker series website as well. Take care.